Hi there, my name is Marlene G, and this is my presentation final on Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. This is my title page. So the video selection for this assignment, I chose to view the movie version of this play directed by Kenneth Branagh. I got to see this on Tubi, which was why I chose this selection. I will compare and contrast this movie version to the play by William Shakespeare for the remainder of this presentation. We'll get started on the differences between the movie version and the playwright, or the play script, sorry. The movie version of Much Ado About Nothing has some noticeable differences in comparison to the play. However, these differences did not interfere with the plot of the play or the overall ending either. We'll start with our first difference. The set for some scenes of the movie would differ from what was illustrated in the play. An example of this is Act 4, Scene 1. That was inside a church in the play script, whereas in the movie it was set outside of the church in a courtyard. Another example of this is in Act 5, Scene 3. The play describes the scene inside of a church. However, in the movie, the men walk along a trail to the gate of a church on the outside. Another interpretation or difference in this scene is Claudio in the play is reading from a scroll, whereas in the movie Claudio reads from a plaque, which he then proceeds to place on the gate after he's done reading it, which is a noticeable difference between the two scenes from the playwright or the play script to the movie version. Moving on to number 2 in our differences. Portions of the dialogue within the play script were left out in the movie version, resulting in less lines and more condensed versions of the scenes in the movie. So the play script had a lot more lines for the characters to read, and that resulted in longer acts in comparison to the movie version. Those acts were a lot smaller and more condensed. Example of this is in Act 2, Scene 3. In the play, it is said that a boy enters the garden and interacts with Benedict. However, in the movie, no boy enters the play and there is no interaction between Benedict or a boy at all. The movie begins with the scene with Benedict by himself walking around Leonardo's garden and begins his line of "I do much wonder." So that was a great example of how dialogue were left out and how some things were purposely cut from the movie in comparison to the play script. For a difference, we'll go to number 3. The order in which the scenes were organized in some acts differed in the movie than what was written in the play. So that was a big difference, a big noticeable difference in my opinion, as when I watched the movie version, I followed along with the play script, and that was a big indication in Act 3. It begins as, in the movie version, Act 3 begins as normal with Scene 1, but instead of going to Scene 2 right away, it skips over to Scene 3. And in the movie version, only half of Scene 3 is acted before it goes to Scene 2. And then in Scene 2, this is also a very condensed version in comparison to the play script. And once this Scene 2 is acted out, in the play, or I'm sorry, in the movie, it directs back to Scene 3 and continues on with the rest of that other half of the scene. As well, another example is within that same act, after Scene 3 is complete, it skips over Scene 4 and goes directly to Scene 5. Whereas in the play script, it proceeds as normal. Act 3 begins in Scene 1, then Scene 2, 3, 4, and 5. That was a big noticeable difference in my end, and one that I'm pretty sure if others saw would notice that as well. Alrighty, so for number 4, our last difference, the movie version added additional acts to some scenes, as well as leaving some scenes out of the movie that is in the play. So, for example, Act 1, Scene 2 is not present in the movie at all. And referring back to difference number 3, how I mentioned in Act 3, Scene 4 is skipped over, that's another example. They do not interact with Scene 4 at all in the movie version. That is just completely skipped over, and that is just cut out completely. When I say the movie version added additional acts to some scenes, a great example of this would be, let's see, Act 2, Scene 1. In the play script, it writes that only Leonardo, Antonio, Hero, and Beatrice enter a hall in Leonardo's house, and then they begin talking as normal. That's written on the play script. However, in the movie version, Don John, Conrad, and Baracho are all included in this scene as well. They all enter along with the others, Leonardo, Antonio, Hero, and Beatrice. And Don John actually interacts with Hero. He grabs her hand and kisses it before he leaves the hall with Baracho and Conrad. And that kind of leaves Hero confused, and she's looking around, and then the dialogue between her and Leonardo and everyone else begins. So that was a big difference between both the movie version and the playwright as far as adding scenes. I believe the movie version added this scene not to portray from like the original concept of the plot, but just to provide more context to the storyline, just to add a little bit more knowledge, I guess, and understanding to us audience about how Don John was supposed to be portrayed and how the storyline was unraveling and progressing. Alrighty, let's go to similarity next page. So for similarities, number 1, the dialogue within the play script and the movie are closely identical. I could easily follow along with the play script in hand as captions to the movie, even with some portions of the movie condensed. So what I mean by that is even with some of the lines cut from the scenes in the act, the dialogue that was kept in the movie were pretty closely identical, if not word to word identical to the play script. So for similarity number 2, the characters within the movie are identical to the play script. They do not leave any characters out or add additional personnel than is what is described or illustrated in the play. I really appreciated this. They didn't need to add another personnel or take anyone out because every character had its role in the play, and so I thought it was a phenomenal similarity to have each character from the playwright or play script. Identical in the movie version. Lastly, for my last similarity, the overall plot and the theme of the movie and the play are the same. The movie did not try and stray away from the original concept of love as the theme or as the play intended, and it also ended it exactly how the play was written. That's a huge similarity between the two, and I thought was a very important one. So for the director versus the Shakespeare, the director for the film version took the liberty of keeping the original time period and placing of the play, and it was obvious the director did not want to modernize the play. Let's see. So for this portion, the director attempted to portray the play or the place the play was set in Messina within the first scene of the movie. That first scene with everybody there, the scenery of the green pastures stretching long and wide, all the aisles of the grape trees and the vines and the wide open lands really put into perspective where the play was set in, and the director really did a good job of trying to portray that. The director, he also tried to solidify the time in which the play was set in by the buildings and the structures. The buildings were large and made of stone, which was during this time period of 1599, I believe that's the time period Shakespeare set this play in. That's what primarily buildings were made of, were stone, and he portrayed that in the movie, which was a great illustration there. Another illustration was when the men bathed together in communal baths. Thermia or Therma Roma. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. That right there, and that was in the first scene of the play or the movie. That right there was a great indication and a great solidification in the time period in which the play was set in, because communal baths, especially within men, they're not modernized. It's not something that's done now. That's something that was only done in that period of time. So that was a great way of indicating what time period the movie and the play was in. And lastly, although some lines of the script were cut from the play into the movie, it was evident the script of the movie version was entirely prepared by the play script. As I said before, the dialogue and the lines from the characters of the movie, if you followed along with the script and they were there in the play script, they were closely identical, if not word from word the same. So it was apparent that he took a lot of influence from the play script and tried to keep the original content with it. If not, he did keep the original content of the play script, I'm sorry. Alrighty. So active versions definitely do help us try and understand not just Shakespeare, but all playwrights. They most definitely aid in understanding the overall inventiveness of what Shakespeare and what playwrights envisioned the play to be. They help us perceive the play through Shakespeare's eyes and his creativity and what he was intending, what his mind was going through while he was writing this play. It definitely helps us kind of look at it from his point of view, from his perspective, just to how the play is supposed to, be perceived. Active versions also help us conceptualize what Shakespeare wants the audience to feel within the scenes of the play. They help us read between the lines and beyond the black and white paper. They really do help us understand, the intensity of scenes, the emotions of the scenes, and the dramatized of the scenes. It really does help it put into perspective what the characters are going through and what us as an audience should be feeling. Active versions also help us understand the reasoning behind Shakespeare's creation of certain characters and their importance to the plot of the play. Acted versions, especially within the actors, they help us understand why certain characters are inputted into the play or what their roles are intended in the play. Don John, when he's first introduced in the play script, it's not evident that he is, unhappy or an unpleasant person, whereas in the movie version, even in this picture, in the PowerPoint slide, Don John is seen to be very unhappy, very just not content with what is going on and being in the position that he's in right now. And that's something that can only be portrayed in acted versions, and you can't see that written on a play script that's just word from word, line from line. Alrighty, and this is my references for all the pictures on each slide. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I really do hope I liked it, and I hope I was thorough and explained everything well enough for you to understand. Thank you so much.